Good evening, our community tonight. Tonight's topic on our podcast is about life's journeys. I was talking to my grade 9 students today how sometimes when we study, when we decide to go into a career, either become an employee or having our own businesses as part of entrepreneurship, we always have to make decisions and decide on what our journey will be. And it's interesting because we did that in French and in English. So the whole idea is always the fact that life is a journey, and it is all how we see it, how we portray ourselves in it, and also how we are seeing ourselves as a positive experience or living sometimes difficult times. So it's always something to think about, and it's not always easy. Tonight's show is about three parts. The first part is about learning, then I talk about teaching, and then we go to Leadership, three topics that I love to talk about, and I think you will enjoy this. So my name is Alain Faber. I've been teaching for more than 25 years in Canada. I've been teaching languages, science, geography, history, and I'm here to share some of my thoughts, my ideas. And if you have any questions, you can always put them in the comment section. I'm always hoping that you have great ideas. And if you are listening to this podcast afterwards, don't hesitate to put your comments in the comments below so I can use your ideas to fill this podcast of learning. So our first part today about learning is how do we learn? No, what is the learning journey? When we think of learning, it's easy. We go somewhere, we see something new, we learn. We take a book, we open the book, we learn. But we have to think that learning is also part of a journey. I'm not talking about social media where we're looking at something for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds. I'm talking here about learning something that we are interested in, something we're curious about, and where we want to have a deeper understanding of the topic. So if you're learning, I see there's 5 big steps, and you notice the 5 steps I will also carry out for the other sections of this podcast. When you learn, there's always that introductory part. The introductory part is when you come across a new idea, a new concept, something you never knew before. So what happens is that you notice something and then you become curious. And this is the amazing part about learning. If it's not something that interests you, you won't feel any curiosity. But as soon as your curiosity has emerged, then you know that you are in a path to want to learn something or learn as much as possible about the topic. So if you're in the language, if you're in science or any other topics, the first thing we want to know is how do we learn the vocabulary? So we need to learn the words related to what we're curious about. We see pictures, we see text, we see videos. And the reason for that is that we want to have a good idea of what the topic is all about. Sometimes I tell people, Wikipedia sometimes is a good place to start. The information is good, sometimes it could be better, but it's good enough for us to learn the vocabulary about the topic, and we can use the reference at the bottom, and it is outstanding. This week in Science Grade 9, we are learning about astronomy, and we're doing a review of the solar system. But interestingly enough, as we talked about the solar systems and how humans are exploring the solar system, then several questions came about. Questions about exploration, question about mechanics, rockets. And interestingly enough, as we discussed, I realized that many of the students have their ideas either through videos they watch, through videos they've played. So therefore, they have great ideas. But to have an umbrella look, like to go a bit above and have a big look at the topic, then they realize that there's a lot to think about. So I was talking about, for example, we brought back, we brought back a sample from an asteroid called Bennu. And it was the whole planning part of the team, the whole engineering to create the satellite to go to the asteroid, the whole the whole system engineering part to get the sample and bring it back here. And then now we have all the scientists that will work on the project. So it is exciting. Everybody's curious, and it is part of learning something new. Now, once you start being curious about a topic, then at some point you have to say, okay, where do I want to focus my attention? Because when we're learning, it's very hard to learn everything about everything. It's almost impossible. We can learn anything that we want in life. We just have to focus on it. On the other hand, it is hard to know and learn everything about all topics. So that's why in school, sometimes using interest in our job, it's very good to start focusing on something specific that we want. If you think of medicine, for example, a lot of the doctors, they focus on one specialty to be able to focus and get very good at what they're doing. And I have to say that I have so much respect for generalist doctors, where they have to know a lot about a lot of different difficulties, ailment, also if someone has accidents and so on. I have a lot of respect for them because they are learning a lot. Now, they're not learning about how to fix a car. They're there to make sure that we stay healthy. So then again, you can see there's some focus happening right here. So we talked about when we learn something, we're introduced to the topic, we get curious about it, then we want to focus on something specific. So for example, if you think of astronomy, taking the example from before, I cannot talk about all the topics related to astronomy and astrophysics in one show. All I can do is focus on one aspect, one mission, and then we can focus on other missions afterwards. It's quite important because otherwise our minds and our thoughts are all over the place. And then we end up not learning anything in depth, but we're just superficial knowledge on top. So once we have focused on a few specific topics, then we become comfortable with the knowledge. And that's quite important because from being introduced to a topic, to learning, to better understanding, asking questions, by feeling comfortable, then we say, okay, I know much about a topic. Let's see if I can extend the attention to similar topics so you can grow your knowledge. Because in order to learn, I do believe that you need to feel comfortable where you are. Your environment has to be amazing. And once the next step after being comfortable with the topic is actually sharing what you know to others. And what I believe is that once you start teaching others, when you start mentoring others as a learner, then that's when you become better and better in the topic. Because to explain something to someone, it's not that easy if we don't have a good understanding. For example, in my science class today, we were talking about asteroids, and then we talked about simulation of an asteroid hitting the planet. And then what I did is that I had some containers with flour, and then like to cook pancakes, for example, and I had other containers with dirt, with rocks, and so on. And I had a variety of little balls. Some were lighter, some were heavier, and I let them drop those projectiles and those balls in the flour, in the dirt, in the rocks, just so for them to have a good understanding of what happens if you have an asteroid hitting a surface. So from there, I had introduced the topic. From there, I got them curious. There was a simulation. We talked about the vocabulary, making sure they understood. And from there, I asked them to focus specifically on the variables, on what we wanted to measure, which, for example, the craters formed after the projectile hit the ground. Then they felt comfortable about it. Then we did a lab. So at this point, they could talk about all the topics without any doubts because they saw it. We work on the vocabulary. They thought about it. They played with a simulation. They did a lab hands-on. There's no doubt that everybody understands the topic now. So that is how we can take a learning activity and build up the learning so that at the end, they can talk to each other. And what will happen is tomorrow, I'm going to ask them if they have any questions. And I'm sure there will be amazing questions related to what we did today, but with the questions will be so much better because it will not be based on what they know from a video, from what they know on the video games. The questions will be coming from what they've experienced and for them wanting to go beyond. That is exciting. That brings us to our second topic for tonight, which is about teaching. Now, I've been teaching for 25 years, and amazingly enough, the teaching journey is very similar to the learning journey. And if you think about it, we're all interrelated in many ways. So if you are teaching, basically, it goes like this. First of all, you are being introduced to the topic of teaching. And being introduced, it's easy. You go to a workshop, you go to training, and then you see someone doing a presentation. You go to a conference, someone is sharing something to you, and then you say, you know what? I've learned so much. I think I would like to do something similar. Or you were someone taking care of a group, a project manager, and then you say, well, I'd like to do more project managing. So what happened is from there, you are saying, okay, let's see what I can do. And then curiosity comes in. When you're curious about something, then you say, okay, is it possible for me to give a TED talk? Is it possible for me to get involved in a committee at my work, at my school? And so that you can experiment, learn while you are doing. Teaching is amazing. Teaching can be easy, but it can be hard. The best way to learn is actually doing it. And that's why sometimes people will say, okay, I do what I can, but after 2 or 3 or 4 years, people say, you know what? I don't think it's for me. And then they want to leave. So what happens is they start something and then they decide to go, which I can respect tremendously. So the question is, okay, if you feel that teaching is not quite what you want to do, but you've been there for a few years, but you still like teaching, then you have to see, okay, what are the possibilities, what are the choices you can do? And that brings to the idea that a third part where you need to start focusing on something specific. So if you're teaching, then you have to say, okay, what grades am I teaching? Because different teachers are amazing at different grades, but not all of them. For example, I have so much respect for elementary schools teachers. I do much prefer teaching at the high school level. So that is something that I've learned. I've experimented. I taught at grade 4, I've taught grade 8, grade 7, then grade 9 to 12, and I do prefer the older kids. I know some friends that they say, you know what, these are big kids and they scare me. But sometimes when I look at little kids and there's 25 of them running around, I don't feel that comfortable. So we all have our interest and uh, our talents. The next thing is when you think about specifics, if you are teaching in a classroom, then you might realize that you love the classroom, but maybe you'd rather be in another school because every schools have a different culture. So if sometimes you say, okay, you know what, I love this school, go for it. I've been in the same school for in January, that will be my 20, I will have done 20 years at the same school. But before that, I had done 3. So it took me a while to figure out, okay, I was not liking one school more than the other. I had to travel more. Kids are always amazing, but you have to decide what works best for you so that you feel comfortable and you're willing to say, okay, you know what, let's see what else I can do. If you're a project manager, same thing. Some people are amazing at doing, let's say, project planning. But there's other people where planning is great, but they would much rather be with a team that are putting prototypes or they go beyond the concept. And you have to realize that in any type of situation, you could say, well, where I'm at right now, I know a lot of things, I can do it, but I think I'd like to do other things. And that's how people start moving around, saying, okay, let's see if I can try a different position in the same company. Let's see if I can try something else in another school, in another team, and then promotions comes in and so on. So the whole thing of teaching is the fact that you're learning to do the training for either kids, adults, and so on. So once you're introduced to teaching, you teach a few years, then you focus on something specific to figure out what works best, either uh, young kids, older kids, adults. These are big questions. Then you become comfortable with the topic. And that's quite important because once you get comfortable with teaching, you become comfortable with training, you become comfortable with managing teams, then you have to figure out, okay, what's the next step? Do I want to continue where I'm at, being comfortable, and then I can experiment more? And then the beauty with that is that by feeling comfortable, there's a feeling of feeling a bit safer, and then people enjoy feeling that way. And that brings us to the 5 step, which is once you feel comfortable with um, what you do, then the best thing you can do is to become a mentor. Because when you start being a mentor is a person who will share what they know, but also will guide people that are just starting by giving them the encouragement, by giving them some tips to try to get better. And every so often, I wonder there's so many teachers that they go into teaching, they start teaching, and after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they decide, no, it's not me, and they decide to leave the profession. And the big question is, do they leave their profession because they're not meant to be teachers? Or is it because they may not have had the mentors to be able to help them to find out what works best for them? So I do believe that is important. Okay, I'm going to take care of that. There was a little spider by my camera right here. Perfect. So we've talked about learning. We've talked about teaching. Now I would like to spend some time to talk about leadership. Now, leadership also covers the 5 concepts I just covered in learning and teaching. So let's see what they are. Once you decide that you've done a lot of learning, when you decide that you've done a lot of teaching, training, be there for others, then you might decide that leadership is what you'd like to do. Because leadership is the idea that you've learned a lot, you've helped a lot of other people. And what happens is that you decide that you may not no longer do the teaching job, but you're there and you want to help teachers become better teachers. So, yes, you can be a mentor, but if you decide to go into leadership, then it goes to the next level. And I think that is an important part of growth for some people. So, when you think of leadership, then you're introduced to the topic. You're being introduced by conversations you have with people that are at your workplace. If you're part of a professional organization, you have conferences, engineers meet engineers, we have salespeople meet other salespeople. So, what happens is you start to meet other people that love what they do, but are there to lead others to do their best work. So in the school, we have the administrator, and what they do, they're there to support the teachers who are supporting the students to make sure that everybody in the school, in the district, in the organization feel that they can contribute. That's quite important. Now, once you have been introduced to leadership, the second part is you have to start learning to lead, and that is quite interesting. So, for example, there's some organization where they will have training sessions on discovering your leadership style, discovering your interest. Do you prefer to work with larger teams, smaller teams? And the reason for that is once you get into a leadership role, it's quite different. You no longer do the work of the people with you. You are guiding them to do their best work. So that is a shift in thinking there. So you start managing, you start being there for your team, for the people working with you. But then you have to focus on a few things. Once you become a leader, then you have to know yourself enough so that you can help your team. I was listening to a lot of people in leadership. Often they say that when there's a move from one organization to another, often people don't leave an organization. They tend to leave people that lead them. And the reason for that is people need to feel comfortable, need to feel understood so that they can do their best work. So, as a leader, you do your first steps, and then what you need to do is you need to learn the leadership skills to lead others. So a teacher is a leader in their classroom. A parent is a leader in their family. Now, if you're project manager or you're leading a group, you need to figure out what are the style of management that are best fitted for what is there. Some group do we need to have a very well structured so that whoever makes the decisions is trickling down. For example, in the army, there's a well established structure. Some other organization, what they have someone with the main ideas. They bring ideas to a group, and that group has is being led to use their creativity to achieve the outcome the company is looking for. So there are different kinds of management. And often when people start managing, too often people say, well, it's what is the word? They tend, let's see, it's micromanaging. They want to be there with people. They want to see what everybody is doing so that they can help everybody in the team as much as possible. That way of leading, which is micromanagement, often is the idea that someone may have been promoted, they're used to do the work, and now they're supposed to be there to lead people doing the work. But in their mind, they're still there to do the work. And that's why sometimes micromanagement happens. Now, there are places and times when you need to be there to help people. Someone's coming in as a new employee, going into a new department, lots of things to learn, or maybe sometimes an organization needs to work with a rigid management style. That's possible. In which case, people are happy to go on forever. I know some people where all they need to do is that when they go to work, they're told these are the three things you need to do. They do them, and that's all they want to know. And you know what? That's amazing. But once you lead that for a while, at some point you realize that that's a lot of work to be there for people, to lead them, but also do the work with them or for them to make sure that the results gets done. So then when you become comfortable as a manager or as a leader, then what happens is you step back and you're there to help people to become the best version of themselves. So that means that if you're in a school, the leaders are there to help teachers to be the best teachers they can be. Not by telling them what to do, but by giving them encouragement, leading them to where they need to go so that the school organization works well. But what happens is that there's a bit more macro management. In a team, that's the same thing. You have a project manager. Instead of being uh, behind everybody in the team, what they do is that they outline what needs to happen, and then from there, they will go and meet with the team member, discuss with them what they can do to take care of irritants, for example, and then make sure that the workers works best. On TikTok, I follow a sales rep, a sales manager, and that's what he was saying. He said sometimes as a manager, what you need to do is not to be there to tell people what to do and how to do it. Is to tell people this is what needs to happen, and then listen to them with the things that don't work out, the irritants that prevents them to do the best job, and then fix those problems. So you let people do what they can do, and then you fix what some of those things that maybe are outside of the team to make the team do their best. And that I think is quite amazing. And once you're comfortable with leading, that brings us to the fifth part, which is you can become a mentor, you can become a coach, and then as a leader, you can help other leaders be the best they can be. So that means that you are not there to tell leaders what to do or how to do it, but you're there to say, okay, what are you trying to do? What are your thoughts on what needs to happen? And then you guide them through the thinking process. Because when you are learning, when you're teaching, and when you're leading, too often we forget that if we have a process in place, then we can direct our energy and resources where it matters so that we can achieve the results we want. So today we talked about learning, teaching, and leadership. But for those three parts, we talked about the fact that in any of the levels you're introduced to the topic, Then you are exploring to try to figure out what you can learn. Once you've explored a little bit, you know the vocabulary, then you start focusing on what interests you the most, because we cannot know everything about everything. However, we can know a lot about one specific topic, and that's when you specialize yourself. Then you become the best at your craft. And from there, you focus on being comfortable with the information so that you can, as a fifth level, be there to teach others. So a learner will be able to help other learners. Teachers will be able to help learners and other teachers. And leaders will be able to help learners, help teachers help teachers and learner, and leaders helping leaders and teachers and learners. And at the end, it's a whole happy family, making sure that we can make a difference so that the next generation is better than this one, so we can improve our lives. On this was this week's podcast. Thank you very much for being here today. I have this podcast every week at 7:30 on Wednesdays. Can't wait to see you next week. If you have a topic you'd like me to discuss, please tell me and write in the comments below. Slowly, I'm looking into meeting other people so we can have podcasts and having interviews at the same time. I think that's something that could be fun. On that note, be great, be amazing, be the best learner, be the best teacher, and the leaders in your groups. Take care. Bye bye.